He wasn't wrong. If our parents had made up their minds, they would find a way to see their plan through, with or without Marcus's cooperation. Just talk to them, I said finally. Make them understand what this is doing to me. To us. I gestured between us. Because this isn't just about a house, Marcus. This is about our relationship as brothers. If you go along with this, I don't know if things can ever be the same between us. Marcus looked stricken. You don't mean that. I do. The realization hit me as I said it. This is a crossroads for us. You either stand with me as my brother, or you stand with them and their discriminatory view that your life choices are somehow more valuable than mine. We talked for another hour, reminiscing about childhood memories at Aunt Sarah's house, how she'd let us build forts in the living room, bake cookies at midnight, stay up watching scary movies that our parents would never have allowed. By the time we parted, Marcus had promised to speak to our parents to try to make them see reason. I wasn't convinced it would make a difference, but it was something. The next day, I steeled myself for the conversation with my parents. Rather than facing them together, where they could present a united front, I decided to follow Ms. Rivera's advice and speak to them individually. Dad was easier to pin down. He had a standing tea time at the local golf course every Wednesday morning, and I knew he always arrived an hour early to practice his putting. I found him on the practice green, methodically rolling balls toward a hole with the concentration of a surgeon. "Dad," I called, approaching slowly. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "I thought we should talk. About Sunday." Dad straightened, sizing me up as if preparing for a confrontation. "I stand by what your mother and I decided. It's what's best for the family." There was that phrase again. The family, as if I wasn't part of it. "Can we sit?" I gestured to a nearby bench. Dad hesitated, then nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, watching an elderly foursome tee off on the first hole. "Do you remember when I was 10, I began, and I wanted to quit baseball because I wasn't as good as the other kids?" Dad looked confused by the apparent non sequitur. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You told me something I've never forgotten. You said, 'In this family, we don't give up just because something is hard. We face challenges head-on.'" A small smile tugged at his lips. "You went on to hit the winning run in the championship game that season." "I did. Because you believed in me. You gave me a chance to prove myself." I turned to face him directly. "So why aren't you giving me that same chance now? Why are you assuming I'll never have a family of my own?" Dad's expression hardened again. "Alex, you're 34. If starting a family was a priority for you, you would have done it by now." The casual dismissal of my life choices stung. Did it ever occur to you that I've been working toward different goals? That I've been focused on my career, on saving for my future? That maybe I want to be financially stable before I think about marriage and children? "Those are excuses," Dad said flatly. "Your brother managed to do both. Marcus and I are different people with different paths." Clearly, the word was loaded with judgment. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "Dad, I need you to hear me. Taking away my home, even if it's legally yours, feels like punishment for not living my life the way you think I should. Is that really what you want, to punish me?" For the first time, Dad looked uncomfortable. "We're not punishing you. We're helping your brother secure his family's future. At the expense of mine, you'll find another place to live. You're resourceful." I could see I wasn't getting through to him. Dad had always been stubborn, set in his ways, but I had to try one more angle. What if I told you I am thinking about family? That I've been seeing someone, and it's getting serious. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had been on several dates with Natalie, a landscape architect I'd met through work. We connected well, had similar values and goals. It wasn't serious yet, but it could be, given time. Dad's eyebrows rose. Is that true? Yes, I said, committing to the partial truth. Her name is Natalie. We've been taking things slow, but I care about her, Dad, and the stability of having my own place, even if it's technically yours, has been important for me as I build this relationship. Dad was silent for a long moment, considering this new information. Why haven't you mentioned her before? Because I wanted to be sure before I introduced her to the family. After what happened with Tara, I let the sentence hang, knowing Dad would understand. My broken engagement had been painful and public. Dad picked up his putter again, a sure sign he was processing. Well, that's good to hear, son. But it doesn't change the fact that Marcus needs a solid investment for his family's future. And what about my future family's needs? Dad sighed heavily. Look, Alex, the decision has been made. The papers are being prepared. I'm sorry if you feel it's unfair, but sometimes life is unfair. You'll bounce back. You always do. With that, he returned to his putting practice, effectively ending our conversation. As I walked back to my car, defeat weighed heavily on my shoulders. If Dad was unmovable, my only hope was Mom. But that conversation proved equally fruitless. Mom met me for coffee the next day, listened sympathetically to my concerns, even shed a few tears when I described how hurt I felt. But ultimately, she deferred to Dad's judgment. Your father knows what's best for everyone, she said, patting my hand. He's always taken care of this family. But he's not taking care of me, I protested. He's prioritizing Marcus over me, because Marcus made the life choices Dad approves of. Mom looked uncomfortable with my directness. That's not true, Alex. We love you both equally. But equal doesn't always mean identical. Your brother has different needs right now. And what about my needs? Does anyone in this family care about those? Of course we do, sweetheart. But you're so independent, so capable. Marcus has always needed more guidance, more support. The irony was breathtaking. My self-sufficiency, my ability to stand on my own 2 feet, traits my parents had ostensibly raised me to value, were now being used as justification for treating me as less deserving of help. As I drove home from meeting Mom, a bitter realization settled in my chest. I was alone in this fight. Marcus might sympathize, might even speak up on my behalf, but he wouldn't refuse what our parents were offering him. And my parents were united in their conviction that their decision was right and just. I had one last hope. Ms. Rivera, and whatever legal options she might uncover, slim as they might be. But even as I made an appointment to see her again, a part of me knew that the real battle wasn't legal. It was cultural, societal. It was about challenging the deeply entrenched belief that a person's worth, their claim to family support and resources, was tied to their marital status and reproductive choices. And that was a much bigger fight than I had ever anticipated taking on. The week that followed was a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office to avoid going home to the house that would soon no longer be mine. I scrolled through rental listings during lunch breaks, each one more depressing than the last, either wildly out of my price range or so far from work that my commute would double. Natalie noticed my distraction during our dinner date on Friday night. We were at a new Thai place downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs dangling from the ceiling. "You've read that same menu item 3 times," she observed, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "What's going on?" I hesitated. We'd only been dating for 2 months. Did I really want to burden her with my family drama? "It's complicated," I hedged. "I'm good with complicated," she replied with a gentle smile. "Engineer, remember? Complicated is my comfort zone." So I told her everything: the family dinner, my parents' decision, the conversations that had gone nowhere, my growing desperation as the clock ticked down on my living situation. Natalie listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to outrage. That's incredibly unfair," she said when I finished, "and so archaic. Like being single somehow makes you less deserving of security and support?" "Exactly," I said, relieved that she understood so immediately. "It's like they've decided my life has less value because it doesn't match their expectations." "Have you looked into legal options?" I nodded. "I have another appointment with the lawyer next week," but she wasn't optimistic. "Legally, the house is theirs. They can do what they want with it." Natalie took a sip of her wine, her brow furrowed in thought. "What about a compromise? Could you buy the house from them, or at least negotiate a formal lease with a longer term?" "I've thought about that. The problem is, I don't have enough saved for a down payment yet. And even if I did, I'm not sure they'd sell to me when they've already promised it to Marcus." She squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Alex. This sucks." "Yeah, it really does." "Well, for what it's worth, I think you're handling it with a lot more grace than most people would. If my parents pulled something like this, there'd be a lot more shouting involved." I laughed for what felt like the first time in days. "The night is still young. I might end up drunk dialing them with some choice words later." "If you do, record it for me," she joked, then grew serious again. "But really, Alex, don't let them make you feel less than just because you're single. Your life has value exactly as it is." Her words warmed something inside me that had been cold since that fateful Sunday dinner. "Thank you for that." As we finished our meal and headed back to her apartment, I found myself wondering if this relationship might be getting serious after all. The thought was both exciting and terrifying, given my recent disillusionment with family bonds. Saturday morning, I decided to visit Aunt Sarah's grave. I hadn't been there since the anniversary of her death 3 months ago. The cemetery was peaceful, morning dew still clinging to the grass, as I made my way to her plot. "Hey, Aunt Sarah," I said softly, placing a small arrangement of daisies, her favorite, beside her headstone. "Sorry, it's been a while. Things have been complicated." I told her everything, just as I had told Natalie. It felt cathartic to speak the words aloud, even if only to the wind and the trees and the memory of the woman who had loved me unconditionally. "I wish you were here," I concluded. "You'd know what to do. You always did." As I stood to leave, something caught my eye, a glint of metal beside the floral arrangement. Bending down, I discovered a small key, partially buried in the dirt. It looked weathered, as if it had been there for some time. Curious, I picked it up, turning it over in my palm. It was an old-fashioned key, the kind that might open a safety deposit box or a storage locker. Had someone left it here by accident? Or was it meant for someone else visiting a nearby grave? I pocketed the key, intending to turn it in to the cemetery office on my way out. But something made me hesitate. A nagging feeling, an intuition I couldn't explain. Instead, I found myself driving to Aunt Sarah's house, my house, at least for now, and heading straight for the attic. Aunt Sarah had been organized to a fault, labeling boxes with meticulous detail. Christmas decorations 1990 to 1995. Tax returns 2000-2005. Photo albums, family reunions. It took me nearly an hour of searching before I found what I was looking for. A small metal box labeled simply "Important." The key fit perfectly. Inside the box were several documents: Aunt Sarah's birth certificate, her parents' marriage license, old passport photos, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in her familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and began to read. My dearest Alex, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've somehow found the key I left with my solicitor to be placed at my grave on the 3rd anniversary of my death. I hope it didn't take you too long to figure out where to use it. There are things I need to tell you, things I couldn't say while I was alive for fear of causing unnecessary pain. But now, perhaps, the truth will serve you better than continued ignorance. The house you're living in, my house, was never meant to go to your parents. In my original will, I left it directly to you. You were always my favorite. Don't tell Marcus, though I suspect he knows. You reminded me so much of myself at your age, independent, creative, marching to the beat of your own drum. But 3 months before I died, your father came to me with concerns. He worried that leaving the house to you would create conflict in the family. He convinced me that it would be better to leave the property to him and your mother, with the understanding that they would eventually pass it on to you when the time was right. I agreed, partly because I was tired and in pain, and partly because I trusted your father to honor our verbal agreement. I modified my will accordingly. However, I was never entirely comfortable with this arrangement, so I had my lawyer draw up a separate document, a letter of intent that outlines my wishes for the property. While not legally binding, it makes it clear that my intention was for you to have the house. You'll find this document enclosed with this letter. I don't know if this will help your situation. Your father can be stubborn when he believes he's doing what's right for the family. But perhaps knowing my true wishes will give you some leverage in whatever discussions lie ahead. Remember, Alex, family is important, but not at the expense of your own happiness and well-being. Stand firm, know your worth, and never let anyone make you feel like you're less deserving of love and support simply because you've chosen a different path. All my love, Aunt Sarah P.S. There's one more thing you should know. Check behind the loose brick in the basement, next to the water heater. Consider it my insurance policy for you. I read the letter 3 times, emotions swirling. Vindication, anger, a profound sense of being loved and seen by my aunt even beyond the grave. The letter of intent was exactly as she described, a formal document stating clearly that while she had legally left the house to my parents, her explicit wish was for it to ultimately belong to me. With shaking hands, I carefully refolded the letter and made my way to the basement. The water heater sat in the corner, just as it always had. I ran my fingers along the wall beside it until I felt it. A brick that protruded slightly more than the others. It took some effort, but eventually the brick came loose. Behind it was a small waterproof container. I opened it to find a USB drive and another note in Aunt Sarah's handwriting. For emergencies only, use wisely. My curiosity overwhelming, I raced upstairs to my laptop. The USB drive contained only one file, an audio recording dated 3 months before Aunt Sarah's death. I clicked play, and my heart nearly stopped as I heard her voice for the first time in 3 years. This is Sarah Harrington, recording this on May 15th, G2. Richard, if you're listening to this, then you've broken your promise to me about Alex and the house. I want to be very clear. Our agreement was that you would allow Alex to live in my house for as long as he needed, and that eventually the house would belong to him. You assured me that changing my will was just a formality, that you would honor my wishes. I have this conversation recorded as evidence of our agreement. The recording continued for nearly 15 minutes. My father's voice clearly recognizable as he promised Aunt Sarah that he would respect her wishes regarding the house. He explicitly agreed that the property would go to me, not Marcus, regardless of my marital status or whether I had children. By the time the recording ended, I was simultaneously elated and furious. Aunt Sarah had known my father well enough to create this insurance policy. She had anticipated that he might renege on their agreement. And now I had leverage, not legal ownership perhaps, but something that could potentially shame my father into honoring his word. I immediately called Ms. Rivera, explaining my discovery and arranging to bring the documents and recording to her office first thing Monday morning. Then I called Natalie, who insisted on coming over right away. "This changes everything," she said as she examined the letter of intent. "Your aunt was looking out for you, even from beyond the grave." "I just can't believe my father would make a promise like that and then completely disregard it," I said, still processing the betrayal. "People convince themselves that their actions are justified, especially when money and property are involved," Natalie replied. "He probably told himself he was doing what was best for the whole family, whatever that means to him." The question is, what do I do now? Do I confront him with this evidence? Do I involve the rest of the family? Do I threaten legal action even though Ms. Rivera says I might not have a strong case? Natalie considered for a moment. "What would your Aunt Sarah want you to do?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about the woman who had been more of a parent to me in many ways than my actual parents, her fairness, her directness, her unwillingness to tolerate injustice. She would want me to stand up for myself, but not in a way that destroys the family, I said slowly. She valued honesty above all else. "Then I think you have your answer," Natalie said softly. "Be honest. Be direct. Give your father a chance to do the right thing before you escalate." I nodded, knowing she was right. "Will you come with me when I talk to them?" She squeezed my hand. "Of course, whatever you need." Sunday dinner loomed like a storm on the horizon. I had texted my mother that Natalie and I would be joining them, adding that I had important family matters to discuss. Her response had been enthusiastic about meeting Natalie, but notably silent on the family matters part. As we drove to my parents' house, Natalie sensed my tension. "Remember, you have truth on your side," she said, her hand warm on my knee. "Just stay calm and focused." What if they deny everything? What if they refuse to honor Aunt Sarah's wishes? "Then we move to Plan B," she said simply. "But let's give them a chance with Plan A first." My parents' house looked exactly as it always had. The porch light, welcoming, Mom's seasonal wreath, autumn leaves and miniature pumpkins, on the front door. But for the first time, I saw it through different eyes. This wasn't just the house I'd grown up in. It was a symbol of conditional love, of favoritism, of values I no longer shared. Mom opened the door with a broad smile that faltered slightly when she saw my serious expression. "Alex! And you must be Natalie. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room." Everyone indeed. Not just my parents and Marcus's family, but my Uncle Jim and Aunt Beth, my father's brother and his wife. The whole family committee, assembled to either witness or participate in whatever was about to unfold. Introductions were made, drinks were offered, and surface-level pleasantries were exchanged. Natalie handled herself beautifully, charming my mother with genuine interest in her garden and impressing my father with her knowledge of structural engineering. But I could barely participate, my mind fixated on the confrontation to come. Finally, as we moved to the dining room for dinner, Dad cleared his throat. Alex mentioned there was something important to discuss. Perhaps we should address that before we eat? All eyes turned to me expectantly. I took a deep breath, feeling Natalie's reassuring presence beside me. Yes, there is something important, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about Aunt Sarah's house, the one I'm currently living in. Dad's expression immediately closed off. We've already discussed this, Alex. The decision has been made. Actually, I said, pulling the letter from my pocket, I don't think all the information was on the table during our previous discussions. I found this in Aunt Sarah's things. I placed the letter of intent on the table. It clearly states that while she left the house to you legally, her intention was for it to ultimately belong to me. Mom reached for the document with a frown. Where did you find this? We went through all her papers after she passed. It was hidden, I said simply. Along with this. I placed the USB drive next to the letter. This contains a recording of a conversation between Dad and Aunt Sarah 3 months before she died. In it, Dad explicitly promises to honor her wishes regarding the house. The color drained from my father's face. You recorded our private conversation? He demanded, his anger directed at the memory of his sister rather than at me. She did, I confirmed. Because apparently she didn't trust you to keep your word. And it seems she was right to be concerned. A heavy silence fell over the table. Marcus looked between me and our father, confusion evident on his face. Dad, what is Alex talking about? Dad's jaw worked, his hands clenched into fists on the table. This is emotional manipulation, he finally said. Sarah was terminal when we had that conversation. She wasn't thinking clearly. The recording suggests otherwise, I countered. She was very lucid, very specific about her wishes. And you agreed to them. Let's listen to it, Uncle Jim suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. As my father's older brother, he was one of the few people Dad respected enough to occasionally yield to. Not at the dinner table, Mom protested weakly. Yes, at the dinner table, I insisted. This affects the whole family, and I'm tired of decisions being made without all the facts on the table. Natalie squeezed my hand under the table as I pulled out my phone, connected the USB drive via an adapter, and played the recording. Aunt Sarah's voice filled the room, strong despite her illness, articulating clearly her wish that I should have her house. And then my father's voice, promising without reservation to honor those wishes. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Elena stared at her plate. The twins, sensing the tension, had gone unusually quiet. Marcus looked stricken. Richard, my mother said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you really promise Sarah that Alex would get the house? Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red. It was a complicated situation. Sarah was dying. I said what I needed to say to give her peace. So you lied to her? Uncle Jim's voice was sharp with disapproval. I didn't lie, Dad snapped. I intended to follow through at the time, but circumstances change, needs change. Marcus needs nothing from you that he can't provide for himself, I interrupted. unable to contain my frustration any longer. He has a successful career, a beautiful home, a thriving family. What he doesn't need is for you to break a promise to your dying sister and steal my home in some misguided attempt to reward him for following your approved life script. This is not about rewarding anyone, Dad insisted. This is about practical considerations. Marcus will use the property as an investment to secure his children's future education. You're just living there because it's convenient and cheap. I'm living there because it was Aunt Sarah's home, I corrected him. Because she loved me and wanted me to have a place of my own. Because I maintained it and cared for it when she was sick. And because she trusted me to preserve her legacy. And what legacy is that? Dad scoffed. A single woman who never had children, whose bloodline ends with her. What kind of legacy is that?